as a front-end developer, the main thing that drives me is the interfaces we get to see these days. We have a million numbers of sites, and so what separates a good site? What site do you constantly use? Those are the sites which are giving you a faster and more immersive experience. So this is one thing that Gatsby seeks to offer. So let's see how it goes. So way back in the Plone community site, when the ideation process for the Gatsby project was happening, this was the abstract that was given, this paragraph. So basically, you want in your Plone deployment control panel, you want a button. If you just press it, we hold up for a bit, and you get a static Plone site, which basically is like the Plone site, but it's static. So, and it should be as simple as that. Big green button. So this is what we seek to achieve as something in steps almost close to clicking a button. We wanted to give you a static site. And don't we all like, if it's just a button, just pressing it, that seems very convenient, right? So why do we need static sites, and why are we moving towards Gatsby here? So first of all, let's explore the Gatsby ecosystem and what Gatsby is all about. So Gatsby is a static site generator. What it does is generate really performant, really fast static sites that follow the latest web standards, and it's even a progressive web app. And all of this to be done with minimal configuration time. And the web is constantly evolving, and we have huge communities for everything coming up. And currently, one of the most popular front-end frameworks is React, and we have a popular bundler webpack. So it combines all these latest technologies. So we have a huge community following this as well. So that's another thing that made Gatsby popular. And I'd say it uses a different approach from the conventional way of developing sites. I'll be explaining this a bit better. So if you take the normal way on working with React apps, for instance, like a single page application, the way it's structured is like working on an actual app. You're looking at something similar to this. You're looking at an app.js and a couple of other files. So for a person who's used to a website that is on HTML, like it's a couple of pages of HTML, CSS, and to him, it's a couple of pages which are internally linked. That's what a site is to him. And this doesn't make much sense at all. It's like this is aimed at being a single page application. So, and to make it something similar to what I'm talking about, you need a router, more configuration, and all of that. So what Gatsby does is eases this job. So this is what a Gatsby project structure would look like. If you look at the pages part of it, you can see all those, and they're directly rendered as pages itself. Like we have a slash about, you get that page. Slash contact, you get that page. And this index you see right here is what's being rendered at the index page. So it's simple as that. So that what developers want is a better transition from the old way of developing sites to a new way. And what the audience wants is really performant, fast sites. And Gatsby is just the bridge between both. It gives you both. The developer's happy, and even the users are happy. And you can see it also uses, both of them use React. So you can see the code is pretty much the same. It's just in the how it approaches the way of developing site that's different. So you can see this React, and that's a React app, and that's pretty much the same. So even if you're a React developer, there's no transition, almost no transition at all. Moving on. So these are a couple of features of GatsbyJS which you would be interested in. So one would be componentization. We have very complicated flows, user interfaces these days, and it would be hard to put all of that on a single page and just work on it like that. So even for a button, if you look at the design systems, if you know about a couple of them, the single button itself has so much interaction, you will be confused by what to use where and everything. So what this pattern aims at is reusable components. work from the small stuff and start building bigger stuff. So start from a button and add these, keep adding more and more, and in the end you have a full-fledged page. And this way you have a self-contained components. For instance, a drop-down menu. That could be a component by itself. So you could handle all the logic, the styling of all of that in that itself, which means better maintainability, better understanding rather than just huge sheets. I feel it's a good way to go, and that's what React does. And moving on, we have Webpack bundling with the latest tooling. So what Webpack does is create really optimized bundles of your JavaScript, CSS, and even the images and everything are also being handled by Webpack. And this gives you a really, you don't need to worry about any configuration, and you get optimized sites in just using the Gatsby CLI. And for developers, it's even interesting that it has hot reloading, which means as you make a change in your code editor, the change will be reflected on the site in the development server. Then the Gatsby has its own plugin and starter library, which you can see here. It's pretty massive. They have a lot of plugins coming and the community is increasing. And so these are things that are aimed at just being used with Gatsby. They have good documentation and how to use. So it's almost like directly plug-in. It's plug and play. You just install it. You have maybe a line of configuration, and that's it. And there's a lot of them coming up, and all of these are well maintained and also supported by the Gatsby community. Then we have starters. I'll be getting into what these are exactly later. But we have a lot of them as well. And because we are in the React ecosystem, we are talking still in the React world. Gatsby is not like another, it's not using anything different other than React itself. So we can use any React packages that are being used in React in Gatsby as well, which is a huge number. And then the couple rest of the things which I would talk about is it handles styling, responsive images, and also giving an app-like experience really well. So why I mentioned them here is because this is handled by all the other frameworks as well. But what Gatsby aiming at is the best way for you to work on a static site. So and use the modern technology. So for styling, it's not the old way where you have a huge style sheet and you're putting in a comment maybe saying this navbar, and you go down and there's another comment. This is not that. You can use anything that's the latest technology. You can use Sass, you can use CSS in JS. You don't need to worry about some issues which come up because the whole styling itself is getting more complicated. Like you don't need to put in important everywhere to actually get your styles to work. That's one thing. And responsive images, Gatsby has plugins handling this already, so you don't need to think about the manual task in actually generating images. For front-end developers, this is a problem because you get an image from a designer and you have to do it yourself, manually work on the image, and you have to work on putting it up as with a SRC set or whatever for different sizes, maybe do it 3 times. And what Gatsby does is handle all of this internally for you, along with a couple of good-to-have features like blur up on load, which really gives the user a really smooth and fluid experience on the web. So, which is the app-like experience on the web. Okay, I'd like you to check these sites out. These are a couple of popular sites which are developed on Gatsby. Like if you see this, it loads almost instantaneously. And even if I'm reloading it, it works almost like an app. You can see there was no flash. It just reloaded just like that. So those parts were cached, and it didn't even need to go to the server to see if this data was required. So it's that fast. And this is another page, and you can see how it's even really fast, even with all the content that's there. So this is what Gatsby can do, and this is why a lot of companies are adopting Gatsby. And okay, so why go static? So when you say static sites, it feels like a step back. We had static, then we had dynamic. So why are we saying static? So I'd like to say static is not static as it sounds. It's we have a lot of power in the front end itself. Like there's the progressive web app technologies, which gives you a whole experience like using a native mobile app on the web because of the power of the modern phones, which have great processing power in the front end itself. So it has a lot of features you can use by just being static. Then it's really, really fast. You don't have a backend. You don't need to run a couple of things on the server. You can push it up on a CDN, and it's everywhere. All parts of the globe, you can access it. Any part you want in the world, it will be accessible from the fastest server. And it's also not even that expensive. So I'll just wrap all the benefits up into one slide. So these are a couple of things. It uses static rendering, which means you have after the build process, you have HTML, CSS, and JavaScript only, which means it's SEO optimized. It's really, you don't need to worry about that part at all. Like suppose if you're working with React or something, you still have to give it a thought. You have to think about maybe sometimes, in some cases, server-side rendering and all of that. But here, Gatsby is aimed at static side, so all of this is already covered out of the box. Complex server-side setup, we don't databases, maintenance, scaling issues, all of these. When as users increase, you don't need to really think about this. You can even run this on a serverless platform, whatever works for you. And so there's no stress about all of that part itself, all the DevOps part, I guess. And moving even further, there's this thing that like if you have a backend, it has a huge database and all of that. But what the static side does is just pick what information it requires. So it's really small as well. And it ensures security. If it's not there on the server, then you can't technically hack it. And then, yeah, the CDN thing again, that's a really good benefit because when you have a server and you want it to be accessed by people all around the globe and for it to be fast for every one of them, it's hard to get. And so CDN is a pretty easy way these days to do it. And that's where Gatsby could help. So Gatsby source plugin. This is also another part of the Gatsby ecosystem. So what it does is basically use anything as a source, fetch this data, process it, and make it usable for your Gatsby site via GraphQL. And this source could be literally anything at all. You can see it can be a local file, even any APIs, whatever you want. You can just put it in Gatsby and it'll use a plugin with it. And what you get is a Gatsby site which you can use. So this is from the Gatsby site itself, like their homepage. And so this is the whole process of what Gatsby does. And so these source plugins would come in between the build process and the data sources. Connecting line is the source plugin to take this data and make it available to the Gatsby side part of it using GraphQL. And yeah, so the CMS is a couple of them given. Maybe we could have Plone soon. And so have you guys worked with GraphQL before? So yeah? Okay, so I'll still give a basic, just to give why it's used and why it's being adopted a lot. I'll give you a quick idea. So the thing is, suppose, let's take the case that you want to make a burger, and so what process goes into getting all the requirements for this burger? So the REST API way of doing this would be to go to the patty first, and you get all of the patties which are possible, then pick the one you want, go to the sources, pick the ones you want, and that's a two-step process basically. So you have to get the data, process it, and then and so for GraphQL, what you do is instead of you finding the endpoints, you ask for the data. Basically ask for and get exactly what you want. So you have one request and that specifies exactly what you want and you get that. So isn't that an easier way of making things? Okay, moving on. So we have another part of the Gatsby ecosystem, which is starters. So what this aims to do is kickstart Gatsby development really quick. And what it aims to do as for a developer is spend less time on the configuration itself. Like you don't need to worry about how it's what all boilerplate things you need to add, what all patterns that should be followed and all of that. So it just does all of this for you, and you can take what you want, throw away what you don't want. And so basically it speeds up the process for you. And Gatsby plugins, it's a common thing that Gatsby plugins have their own starters. This means that this starter will have a couple or almost all of their features implemented already on the starter itself, so that as a new user, like a plugin is still something that you just install, but you don't know how to use it. So you have all the common patterns, all the common configuration, everything being showcased in this, so that you can use it as maybe if you want to kickstart, you can just use that and take off the parts you don't need and make it work with your side. Or in the case you don't want to actually do that, you can always use this thing as a reference on implementing the features you want. So I'll tell you about the project, exactly what I worked on. So the moving on step by step, we have the REST API as the source, because it gives you the whole Plone site in the JSON format, and this can be used by a Gatsby source plugin and to be used in a Gatsby site. So we are trying to get all the content tree of a Plone site in a Gatsby site to make it static. And so we built a Gatsby source plugin to fix this problem, use the REST API as a source, and make the data available for you on your Gatsby site. Then, so the couple of things that we added as features for it, these features are must-have basically, but it's still considered features. So you have to have a couple of data processing so that the data which is you directly get from the REST API can't be used in a Gatsby site. And we want to be optimized so that a developer on Gatsby can do it in the quickest and the smoothest way possible. And so for this, we have a couple of features like the data processing feature. We have authentication, image, HTML file, all of that's being handled by the plugin itself to be used in the best way possible in your Gatsby site. And a Gatsby starter Plone so that you can get started with your Gatsby site in the fastest way possible. So this is what the starter looks like. I'll give a demo later, but this is basically what came out of the. This uses the kit concept site as the demo site as a source for the demo, and this is the result what we got. It's not fully styled well. I didn't have the time for that, but we did our best. And so if you see in terms of numbers, we all like numbers. So the one towards your right is the normal Plone site, a normal Plone site with the backend and everything. It's I checked the speed metric for that, and that's the score you got. And this is the score you got with Gatsby. And with Gatsby, you can actually get the progressive web app really high as well. I haven't made it installable or added an offline feature as well. So those things are still pending. So that's why that thing is low. But you can see how fast it's almost, I guess, 3 times faster or more than that. So that's the result what we got by making a static version of the exact same site. And it's not only the numbers. If you actually use the site, you can see what all potential it has in making the site more fluid and app-like. So you would still be like, there's React, there's Angular, then buy another framework. So I'd like to say this is, as I mentioned, it's not another framework. It's still like an extension of the React things we already do. So it has the static side benefits, which we already talked about, the speed, the SEO, all of that, and you don't need a server. Then this I feel is a step forward in the direction of web development in 2018, as Timo was talking about. So we are using the latest bunch of tools that we have to us. We are using the most performant methods, the most like the popular methods, which means we have a great community following as well for this. Then, as I mentioned initially, it uses a different approach as compared to the React one. So you can use this, the transition from a normal, for a normal web developer would be, I feel, could be easier if you start with Gatsby because of the pages thing I was talking about. And this is one thing I'm just still speculating, is both Volto and Gatsby are in the React ecosystem itself. So what we could possibly see is components in Volto, components or patterns which are implemented in Volto being directly or at least imported into any of the Gatsby projects. if we can export them from Vault 2 as well, because both of them are based on the React ecosystem, and the code is pretty much the same. So you can directly use components which are built in Vault 2 in Gatsby, and that should work. So this could be a future for Gatsby which we could explore. And a couple of when I was talking to a couple of people, like I did talk to Timo, I talked to Asko about what could be possibly helpful for the current Plone people on how it could directly help them in use cases, like direct use cases where like I could use this here. So I got a couple of ideas on that, and the notable ones I've mentioned here. So one would be subsites, which would mean suppose if you have a huge site for take a university or something, and they have a particular they want a page to be used for an event or something that is going to have a lot of viewers. You don't need to edit the content much. You have put in the content already and you're done, and you want to be viewable by a lot of viewers in a smooth manner, be available to everyone around the globe maybe. So all of that you can, with the plugin's current configuration, you can just give the URL of just that part, and it will just traverse that part of the Plone site itself and give you a static version of it, which could be really convenient in multiple cases where you have a huge Plone site and you just want a part of it to be static. Another case would be like, take the case of our conference site, for instance. We have, initially we do a lot of editing in the site. We have a lot of content being added, but after a point we don't need that. We are done with the editing, and also in some cases we have very less editors and we have way more viewers. So in such cases, what we could do is just make a static version out of it. So suppose if there's not much editing happening, you could keep pushing static versions. Or in the case that you're done editing and you just want it published somewhere and you want it to be smooth, and also you can put it in a CDN so that it can be accessible around the world itself, you could just make a static version out of the site when you're done editing the site. So these are two things I thought could be usable right now for the Plone. And so, how much time do we have? Okay, so moving on, I'll quickly try to take you through how the plugin works, so that if anyone's interested in contributing or maybe developing in this space, this could help. So this is just the base of what the plugin does. We have a lot of content objects in a Plone site. We have a lot of like a document, news items folder. Those are the basic ones. So we have a lot of them. And we want to be able to go through, we have to find all of them, get this whole content tree in Gatsby. So for this, we adopted a 3-step process. So the first problem to be faced was that we don't know what all content actually exists. The whole list is not available to us directly. We are talking about, like suppose if you explore the site itself, you could navigate around a bit, but that doesn't mean you have seen every single piece of content. And suppose if it's a huge site with some 30,000 objects or so, it becomes really difficult to find. So we did try out a couple of approaches for this, but this is the one we found most efficient. So we have a search endpoint in the Plone REST API, which gives a full list of all the content objects in the site. And this can be used as our way to figure out which all objects are there in the site. And through this site, we have if you check, you can see that it has the IDs, which are the URLs. So we save all of them. We go through all of them individually so that we can get the whole data that's available from each content object, and use this array of data into Gatsby nodes. So this is the 3-step process. So if you think of it as a better way to say it would be like, suppose you're new to Tokyo and you want to visit every single place and you don't know places still. So what search does is like provide a map to you. So you have a full idea of what exists where. And this could help you figure out what all to visit, what all to choose from. And that's what we did here. We got a full list of data of all the content objects. And this is a sample GraphQL request of all the documents in that site, which we got as the end result after all this processing was done. We have it available in GraphQL for you to use, and that's what you see here. Then zipping through fast, a couple of things that is implemented. For authentication, we have JSON Web Tokens and .n, which would be the optimal solution we found for handling some REST APIs which would need authentication before you can get data from it. You have images, files, and HTML content in Plone site, right? You have stringified HTML. This was a major thing which we struggled a bit with. We had a lot of stringified HTML data, and currently what Volto does, I think, was use this dangerously set inner HTML, which is not the optimal way to do it. So we try to do this instead, serialize the HTML data, and deserialize it directly into React nodes rather than injecting HTML. So this is one thing that is done by the plugin itself. So you don't need, as a Gatsby user, you need to worry about any of this because it's all handled in the plugin itself. Even the images, even the files are all handled, and you just need to worry about how they look in the Gatsby side. That's it. Navigation is also important. So, but the best part was that the Plone REST API already provides you endpoints with all this data. So this was very simple to implement, and you can directly use them in Gatsby side. So if you remember the abstract we were talking about, now we have almost all the basic things that we wanted. We have the data that we needed. We have the content structure, and we have the navigation as well. So we have a basic static site that can be produced using a plugin. And these are a couple of options. So modifying options for the Gatsby plugin is simple as modifying these values. Like a base URL, if you just change it to something else, it picks data from that site instead. If the token is for authentication, which you can directly pass in, search parameters, suppose if you want only certain kinds of content objects, suppose you want only the published documents, you can ask for that specifically there. You can have multiple queries as per what Plone REST API permits. You even have a logging level with additional features. And so you could check it out in this link if you go to this link here. So the installation process for the starter is as simple as this. You can, if you have the Gatsby CLI installed, you can. It's almost like using the Create React app, Gatsby New, what's your project's name, and which template we're using. That link is for the starter we built. And so let's try running it. So what the plugin right now is doing is it's getting the data from this Plone site. It's processing all of that. This is the site I used as source. This is the site. And it's going to generate a static version of this site. And it's done. So let's check it out. Which is almost like, look, it's best we can do. So we have a home page, a demo page with all of this. So Gatsby tries to copy all of that almost how much ever possible, and it has all the features that the Plone site did have at the base level, navigation, all of that. And you notice that the page doesn't reload as you navigate through the pages. It's loading almost instantaneously. You can check all the content like that, but if you check the Plone site, it needs a reload until it goes to the other side. It's fast, but this is also a smooth way of doing it. Okay. So these were my mentors during the Google Summer of Code project, and Asko helped me a lot in the testing part. We have a very good development process itself because of the continuous integration and all of that being set up, and he helped a lot in shaping up the project technically. I'd like to thank him for that. I'm sad he couldn't make it, but yeah, he was a prime part of the project. And Andrea here, he was there whenever I needed the help because shaping up the project is a bit of work, and you have a lot of doubts when you're working with something from scratch to upwards. Timo helped me a lot through the Plone REST API part, and I'm totally new to Plone, and I got to, like kind of used to it and the ideas in a month or so, like less than that, because of Timo. He helped a lot there, and also in shaping up my proposal. And Paul also pitched in ideas and everything whenever we needed them. So that'd be it. I hope you guys are a bit more interested than you were in Gatsby after this. And those are my social media links. And I'd also like to thank Plone for inviting me to speak here. It's a great opportunity, and I did meet a lot of great people. Thank you.